Turkey's currency at an all-time low. We ask what's behind the tumbling lira. Also on the program, America's political climate change. We're in Colorado to assess how Donald Trump's presidency will impact the environment. I'm Imran Garda, and this is the Newsmakers. Turkey's currency, the lira, has plummeted dramatically. It's dropped 12% since the start of 2017, and its value against the US dollar has almost halved in just the last 3 years. Now, the latest decline has caused anxiety across the country. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has blamed speculators for manipulating the markets. But after a wave of terror attacks and a failed coup last year, are investors just spooked by the instability? Others point the finger at economic policies of the central bank and wonder if authorities will take the necessary steps to stabilize the slide. Today's newsmaker is Turkey's tumbling lira, as we ask what can be done to turn the country's economy around.
A new year, but a new low for Turkey's currency. The lira has been tumbling against the dollar, the weight of 2016's political uncertainty, terror attacks and the war in Syria possibly taking its toll.
Last year was a very problematic, tough year for Turkey. This increased uncertainties and, of course, deteriorated business confidence in Turkey for both national and foreign investors.
The impact can be seen here in the Grand Bazaar, one of Turkey's main tourist attractions. But right now, many aren't coming.
2016 was, business-wise, was one of the worst year actually for tourism for all of us.
Ramazan Can believes terrorism is behind Turkey's economic woes.
They just economically, they want to hurt us. You understand? I mean, and the tourism is one of this branch.
Just a few years ago, Turkey was grouped among the mint countries, the most promising emerging economies. But in the first 2 weeks of this year, the Turkish lira was the worst performing currency in the world. On Wednesday last week, it dropped to a record low of 3.93 lira to the dollar, taking it down 12% since the beginning of the year. While it did recover somewhat by the end of the week, the Turkish lira has lost almost 1/3 of its value since the failed coup attempt last July, as the political and security climate rattles investors. Jewellery designer Mehmet Cankut is luckier than some, with regular Turkish customers. But many traders here use US dollars to buy their goods or pay their rent.
Before $100 we say 300 lira. Right now we call 370 lira. When you try to say the customers, they are saying, oh, your price is getting up because of the dollars.
Shopkeepers here are trying to stay positive that things will turn around.
We say, inshallah, it's getting better and better. I don't know.
Everybody knows that the attacks Turkey is facing have an economic aspect. There is no difference in terms of goals between the terrorist with the gun in his hand and a terrorist with dollars and euros in his hands.
With Turkey's economic indicators in good shape, the government blames exchange rate manipulation for the volatile lira, and that Turkey is facing economic sabotage. President Erdogan has called on Turkish citizens to transfer their foreign savings into lira and is offering citizenship to foreigners who invest in Turkey. But economists say the main causes of the lira's troubles are internal, and there needs to be some economic reform.
If our government can guarantee that they will follow strictly the rule of law in Turkey and they can set up the business confidence again, I think we may leave all these negative developments behind.
Are external factors to blame for the lira's instability, or are the problems closer to home? And is change needed within? Yvette McCullough, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by economics professor Harun Öztürkler in Ankara. He's the chair of the economics department at Kırıkkale University, and from Koç University here in Istanbul, Professor Selva Demiralp. She's an associate economics professor and has consulted for several banks, including the European Central Bank. Thanks both of you for joining us. Professor Demiralp, let me start with you. Part of my job is to ask the questions that people at home want to ask. So it's very simple. Why is the lira struggling?
If you look at the performance of lira against the rest of the emerging market currencies, you see that the depreciation is mainly in lira and not in other emerging market economies, currencies. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because in order to evaluate whether this is triggered by domestic events versus international events, you need to compare how your currency is changing its value as opposed to other currencies. So it's mainly a domestic issue because other emerging market currencies, if anything, have appreciated a little bit since the beginning of the year, while Turkish lira depreciated more than 10%. So then we look at home and see what is happening at home to cause this wild depreciation. And what you can see is just the uncertainty about the upcoming elections and the market's belief that the Central Bank of Turkey may not be able to use the most effective tools to defend the Turkish lira.
Okay, Professor Öztürkler in Ankara, would you agree with that? It's mainly domestic and there's uncertainty because of political uncertainty.
Well, mainly domestic, but we must also take into account what's happening in the international financial markets through U.S. Federal Reserve's interest raises in last couple of months. But we must remember that there are a couple of ways that you can determine exchange rates in a country. One of which is fixed exchange rate. The other one is flexible exchange rate, which is Turkey now is following. And there are different regimes in between. And Turkey's central bank's main objective is to stabilize prices, and financial stability is another target. So if you are focusing on, and if you are taking this inflation targeting approach, then to be honest, central banks, except for volatility of the exchange rates, should not care much about the exchange rate, except for exchange rate appreciation's inflation effects. And then, there are some technical feedbacks in that part. But let me remind you a couple of things very quickly. The main reason, if you are following a flexible exchange rate, then what determines exchange rate is supply of it and then demand for it. And in Turkey, since 1946, Turkish foreign trade balance has been negative since 1946. And then we have tourism incomes and some other factor incomes, and then we end up with the current account deficit of, for this year, around $35 billion. And this is not sustainable. If you keep giving this deficit each year, then there will be always fluctuations in your foreign exchange market. Another thing is Turkish GDP is around $800 billion. So Turkish, this foreign exchange deficit in total is almost half of your GDP. And Turkey's short-run
very briefly, please, sir. Very briefly, please, sir.
$120 billion. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Professor Demiralp. So when we hear the Minister of Customs and Trade, Bülent Tüfekçi, saying there are strong signs that foreign exchange rates are being manipulated, and the President, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, calling this economic terrorism as well, to what do you attribute that? They must know something that we don't, surely.
Well, here's how I think about it. In a country where you have no capital restrictions, so there is free flow of capital, international money is just going to seek the highest return after you discount the risk factors, which is what we call risk-free yield. So in the post-2008 period, when the Federal Reserve was injecting money and the dollar was cheap and US interest rates and global interest rates were low, this money flew into emerging markets and Turkey because the rate of return compared to risk was lower in Turkey. But right now we see the opposite currency movement. Now the money is leaving country, dollars are leaving country. We call it an outflow. So this type of speculative action is very natural because after all, we call this kind of currency movement speculative money. So yes, there is speculation. That's the nature of this type of capital movements. And the reason is, at the moment, they think that there is more uncertainty in Turkey, that when you add that uncertainty into risk, when you price it into risk, they don't think the rate of return after you subtract the risk is high enough to keep their money in Turkey. So what we have to do is to think of ways to make Turkish lira more appealing again, which is increasing the rate of return on Turkish lira, or in more plain language, increasing the interest rate on Turkish lira. That's the only way we can stop this kind of movement. And that's exactly what the Turkish Central Bank started to do since last week and yesterday and today this week. So they are trying to reduce the Turkish lira supply, increase the price, which is the interest rate, and try to make Turkish lira more attractive compared to dollars again.
Let's go to Ankara. Professor Öztürkler, do you agree with that? So it's a combination. There's speculation, but there's only speculation because there's instability. So when we have Daesh attacks and when we have PKK attacks and there's a failed coup here, it leads to instability, less confidence in the Turkish lira, in Turkish markets, which leads to speculation, and the two come together in a perfect storm. Would you agree with that?
I completely agree with this statement and what Professor Demiral said. Since the Turkish Central Bank's total reserves, actually usable reserves, is about $35 billion. There is no way Turkish Central Bank can use this direct interference with the exchange rate market. And then the second best option is the interest rate. Unfortunately, because of some political pressures, Turkish central banks cannot openly increase the interest rate. But Professor Demiral was saying they have started, since last week, they have started doing it, increasing interest rate implicitly by reducing the supply of the Turkish lira.
Final point from Professor Demiral. Looking forward, we're in January, we're halfway through January in 2017. Will it take a stable political year in 2017 that's, say, half as unstable as 2016 in order to restore confidence in the Turkish economy?
I would say the worst is over, hopefully, because we have seen very unusual events in 2016. So I think it is safe to say that 2017 will be less volatile and more stable compared to 2016. But how fast we're going to rise up from the bottom depends on how fast we can take the proper measures. And by that, what do I mean? We have to put the elections behind because the elections generate uncertainty. We have to put the emergency state behind because that also generates uncertainty in terms of the conduct of business. And to me, something that is very important is to reestablish the independence of the central bank, because at the moment there are serious doubts about the independence of the central bank. And what we see, as it was just mentioned by the professor, is that central bank is doing an implicit interest rate hike. This should be explicit to make the policy more effective, and the central bank should be able to communicate with the public directly about its intentions. So once we start moving in the right direction, all these uncertainties are behind, and we see the central bank implementing independent monetary policy, I think we're going to make a lot of progress compared to last year.
Okay, it's been great getting both of your expertise, Harun Öztürkler and Selva Demiralp. Thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Donald Trump is just days away from taking what's arguably the most powerful office in the world. And with it will come the responsibility and the resources to tackle the biggest challenges facing our planet. His predecessor, Barack Obama, said the greatest threat to future generations is climate change. Most scientists, security experts, and even economists agree. But Trump has previously called it a Chinese hoax, and he's been filling his cabinet with skeptics and people with close ties to the fossil fuel industry. We sent the Newsmakers correspondent Randolph Nogle to affected communities in Colorado to investigate what impact a Trump presidency could have.
Well, the Pope believes in global warming. You do know that, right? Hey, in this room, it's so hot in here, maybe I'll start to believe it myself. This room is hot.
Scientists say time is running out to limit climate change.
2016 was the warmest year on the record. And it was warmer than the last record year, which was 2015. This was warmer than the last record year, which was 2014.
And a historic deal that aims to curb global emissions at 2% is hanging in the balance.
I will also cancel all wasteful climate change spending from Obama-Clinton.
What skeptics normally say is that climate is changing all the time. It did it in the past, it will do it in the future.
It'll go up, it'll get a little cooler, it'll get a little warmer like it always has for millions of years. It'll get cooler, it'll get warmer. It's called weather.
And this is totally true. So it's warming up over 40,000 years and it's cooling down over 10,000 years and again and again. So just going up and down. What we see in the last 150 years is totally different from that. It's now already much warmer than in any year in the last 800,000 years.
Trump rose to power on the backs of the so-called flyover states. On the shoulders of many of those flyover states are the Rocky Mountains, a vital source of water for people on both sides of the Continental Divide. An impending effect of climate change in the United States is a shortage of fresh water, particularly in the arid southwest of the country. The Colorado River Basin, which provides water to 1 in 10 Americans and irrigates 15% of the country's crops, is at historic lows.
In the last 16, 17 years, which corresponds with a drought that we're having in the Colorado River Basin, there's 20% less water available than has historically been there. We're continuing to use more water, and at the same time, because of climate change, there's less water in the system.
In this environment, it may not look like climate change is taking a toll, but scientists say it is. Come spring, it's mainly through melting snowpack that mountain tributaries like this one feed reservoirs vital to agriculture in dry parts of the country that have few other sources of water. But less rain, rising demand for water, along with rising temperatures, mean that water shortages could soon affect tens of millions of people.
The real consequences of climate change, coupled with an incoming administration that doubts its existence, has left many in the environmental community concerned.
Oh, I think there's an amazing amount of fear.
But some say that there's actually not that much to be afraid of because of the progress in green technology made under the Obama administration.
I'm an electrical engineer by trade with a focus in power distribution. I'm really more of a serial entrepreneur. This is the 10th company that I've built in the last 25 years.
Paul Spencer saw the silver lining in solar technology, a power source that 4 in 5 Americans individually can't access. So he built what is effectively a solar energy cooperative in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, enabling surrounding communities to buy in for less.
It's a cheap power source that's doing great things for the planet at the same time.
He sees a bright future for solar, one that he says won't be impacted by the policies of a new Trump administration.
We're going to put the miners back to work. We're going to put the miners back to work.
There's really been a war on coal, both nationally and here in Colorado as well. And the fact is that we're going to be moving away from an anti-coal administration to an administration that at least will consider the development of these natural resources.
I really think that the last several years have helped the clean energies like solar and wind specifically mature to the point and come down in cost to the point that it's no longer an argument about what you stand for. It's just about how much do you want to shell out of your pocketbook for energy. And these are the lowest cost energies. It's just beautiful that they're actually the best energies for the planet at the same time.
It's a legacy of the Obama administration that's expected to last. Obama has also protected 260 million acres of land, designating 19 national monuments.
Without bolder action, our children won't have time to debate the existence of climate change. They'll be busy dealing with its effects.
As one of America's youngest presidents, Obama was seen as green going in. Now, 8 years later, he'll be seen as even greener going out. Randolph Nokel, The Newsmakers in Colorado.
Well, joining me now from Washington, D.C. is Michael Halpern. He's the Deputy Director of the Center for Science and Democracy at the advocacy group Union of Concerned Scientists. Thanks so much for joining us, Michael. The Sierra Club and others, through the Freedom of Information Act, are basically saving climate data before the new guys come in. It sounds a little bit paranoid. I mean, do you really believe that these guys are going to trash and gut all the previous research?
Well, there's a fine line between being paranoid and being prepared. What we saw happen up in Canada over the past few years when the Harper government was in power was a lot of information disappeared from websites and scientists were muzzled and information became a lot less accessible. During the Bush administration here in the US, a lot of scientists had their work censored, and so it's not a big leap to think that a lot of information will either be made less accessible or they'll stop collecting it.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of these Trump cabinet picks can be called, I guess, climate skeptics, some of them outright climate deniers. The mainstream consensus, 97% or so of scientists say that the Earth is warming, there's climate change, and it's our fault. But I wonder, in trying to be fair to them, in trying to listen to them, is there anything, has there been any data in the last couple years or so that might show that perhaps climate change is happening maybe not as rapidly as we previously thought or apocalyptically as we previously thought, and perhaps the science is not fully settled that it's all our fault?
Well, we are already seeing the impacts of climate change all around the world and here in the United States, whether it's from drought or increased fires or problems with extreme weather. And so we know that climate change is occurring and we need to take significant steps to address it. Whether or not the next administration will engage in that kind of activity, we know that mayors all around the United States and that countries all around the world are committed to dealing with climate change and that we need to move forward.
Let's try and get into Trump's mind a little bit here. Everybody, a lot of people are aware of that 2012 tweet. What an incredible tweet. The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. I mean, I guess, for a country that created the hoax, the Chinese are sure spending billions of dollars in trying to stop climate change. That's a bit strange. I wonder, do you actually think that Trump still believes that, or that maybe he's a little bit adaptable and adjustable in his thinking as he goes along?
Well, it's hard to know what he believes. We do know that a lot of the people he's appointing to important government positions have a history of attacking the agencies that they're being asked to lead and have a history of making a living out of attacking scientists and undermining climate science. And so it will be important to reach out to the president-elect, and he is testing the waters to see how far he can go and to see how his message resonates with the people. It's pretty clear that scientists are willing to speak up and are ready to point out the impact of his policies on the American people, and I think it's going to be real clear, real fast, that it's a losing proposition to continue to deny the science.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering, do you believe that they are ideologically against the climate consensus and the scientific consensus, or that maybe they're a bit pragmatic as they go along?
Well, opposing climate change has become a proxy for opposing government control. It's important to recognize that there are many ways in which you can use science to improve people's lives without the government being in the way. And so I think that there have been many bipartisan support of climate change mitigation, and it'll be really important for those kinds of efforts to move forward. But we can't do that without the same base of evidence, and so it's really important to continue to collect the data on climate change, to continue to fund satellites, and to continue to make sure that science fully informs the climate policies that we do put forward. I think there is room for change, but we will need scientists and the public to demand that we not operate in a fact-free zone, and that the government does pay attention to good scientific information.
Yeah, the Paris Agreement was much heralded. I wonder, are you maybe fearful that because it took President Barack Obama to be tremendously enthusiastic, along with Ban Ki-moon, along with the Chinese and so on, they had to be extremely enthusiastic to bring everybody else on board when it came to Paris, even if a Trump administration doesn't gut the climate data, even if they don't do anything actively to destroy all these years of scientific hard work, just their lack of enthusiasm, will that be negative when it comes to a sort of global approach to stopping climate change?
Well, if they do that, they're going to be going it alone. Countries all around the world and U.S. mayors and U.S. governors are committed to dealing with climate change, and they've sent a strong signal that they do plan on moving forward. And so if the U.S. wants to be left behind, then we'll sit it out. If we want to actually participate in the global economy moving forward, then we will engage. And so I do think that there will be many scientists and others who will push the administration to continue to engage on this, and some of the statements that were made during the campaign will be walked back, because it is important for the U.S. to engage.
Michael Halpin, pleasure getting your thoughts. Thanks so much for joining us. Next time on the Newsmakers, our special coverage of Trump's upcoming presidency continues as we examine his business ties and whether he will make good on his promise to take big money out of U.S. politics. That's all for this edition with me, Imran Garta. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.